Okay, if we can, we'll go ahead and get started here this morning. I apologize for the little bit of delay. I'm just trying to get some things in. Is this morning? Well, it's cold outside, and I haven't woken up yet. So, again, my apologies for starting a little bit late. We just had some housekeeping to get to. I will call this meeting to order. This is the February 13th, 2020 meeting of the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Chris Jordan. I'm the chairman of the commission. I would like to remind everyone to silence their electronic devices. For the commission members, please turn your microphones on when speaking. For those of you who come to the podium, please speak clearly into the microphone as this is being taped. We will start with introductions this evening. I don't think we have anyone from the council here, so we'll start.
Michelle Mahoney.
Mike Lester.
Penny Quigg.
Beth Sweeten, city staff.
Dale Vaughn.
Bunny Tricky Cotton.
Hank Vogt.
Eric Barron, planning manager.
Anna Naniski, city planner.
Ian Zollinger, city planner.
Sonny Sanders, director of planning and protective services.
Brian Wolford, city staff.
Shane Wade, city staff.
Thank you all. Before we move to the procedural matters, we do have a little presentation tonight, a big presentation tonight. Shouldn't say little. As we all know, last meeting, Mr. Yarnell has resigned from the commission. He and his wife have moved outside the city limits, I believe is the case, building their dream home. Maybe not, building a home. But kind of knew this was coming, and we are very, very happy for Chris and his wife. Saddened for us, as he's been a very integral part of this commission. He started in 2006 and ends this year, so that puts him at 14 years. So long time of great service to the community. I personally got to know him as a friend and consider him a friend to this day, and I think everybody on this commission would think that a very knowledgeable man in the field of development and things like that. With that, I will open up the floor to any of the commission members or staff if there would be any comments.
I'll say a thing or two. The members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, of course, serve without pay, and is a tremendous service to the community. And so, not only just for Chris and his many years of service, but also each and every one of you. We make it a point to try to seek out individuals who are knowledgeable in a field relevant to planning and zoning, be it real estate, development, or just having a good handle on neighborhoods and neighborhood involvement and things that are relevant to that field. Chris, of course, filled that role very well, being an engineer and having a lot of background in the in development and a lot of history within the community. And so, I personally, and I'm sure on behalf of all of the staff and the commission as a whole, appreciate his many years of service. I did look up a little bit because I was interested in exactly when he started, and in particular, I was looking for the first case that he would have heard. And I found something kind of interesting. The case, so the first case that got brought up after Chris got appointed to the Planning and Zoning Commission was for a two-story commercial, call it a strip mall, building at 1732 Elm Court. And so that's off of Elm Street, a short little cul-de-sac called Elm Court. I haven't been out there for a while. There was a coffee shop in one unit facing the highway for many years. I believe it's right there with some medical uses around it. But the thing that was of interest to me, as it turns out, that is the first case that I, as a city planner, completed in its entirety. I started the month prior to that, and so that would have been the first case that I processed for the city. So Chris has been on the commission as long as I have been around, and so I found that notable.
Yeah.
Where was that?
2006.
Anyone else have any comments they'd like to make to Mr. Yarnell? If you would, sir, I'd like for you to come up. The mayor, Ms. Turgeon, has a plaque that they have from the city of Jefferson recognizing your service on the Planning and Zoning Commission for the city of Jefferson, Missouri from 2006 to 2020. You served as the vice chairman to this commission from July 2015 to January 2020. So if you come up, we'd like to get that presentation to you. Hey, I opened the floor for them. They had all opportunities for you. I mentioned we were friends, and I didn't want to do that to you. Yes, I'd like to get the commission up here, and we got to beat the mayor in selfies if we can. Here, I'll come around and hand it to you. You guys can come on up.
Yeah, of course I am. I'm short. This is the blessing of being short. I get to, yeah. Thank you so much.
Where's your new house at?
Cole County. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for coming in tonight. Quickly, I would like to reiterate what Eric mentioned about volunteerism, and I appreciate what the commission does, and we all know we are here pro bono, so it is nice to see that everybody does do that. So, Mr. Yarnell, have a great evening. For the rest of us, again, I'd like to encourage you to find other great folks in the community that want to serve on this commission, so I know city staff is always looking. We will move on to procedural matters and determination of quorum and designation of voting alternates. The city code authorizes 9 regular members and 3 alternates. Alternates are designated to vote upon the absence or disqualification of a regular member. A quorum of 5 members or alternates is necessary to conduct business. The following regular members are absent this evening: Jack Deacon, Emily Fretwell, Dean DeToy, and Blake Marcus. Are there any members who will be disqualifying themselves from any agenda item? Seeing none. With that, we do have a quorum, and the voting members tonight will be, I guess I'm voting? Okay. If there's a tie, I will be voting. Michael Lester, Dale Vaughn, Bunny Tricky Cotton, Michelle Mahoney, Penny Quigg, and Hate Vote. Next, we will have a call for cases. If you would, just raise your hand to let us know you're here to present the case, and I think we probably got that figured out. But we will go with the first case tonight is case number P2000. Is that right? Okay. 1. Yeah, I was thinking for 2020, but anyway. 3520 West Edgewood Drive. Is that right?
That's
Okay, I thought you were saying maybe no. All right. Case number P2001, 3520 West Edgewood Drive. It is a preliminary PUD plan. It's a request filed by the Jefferson City Medical Group, the property owner, for a preliminary PUD plan to construct a 28,000 square foot surgery center. Is there someone here to present that? Thank you. Ian, we have no requests for continuance.
that's correct.
Obviously, I don't believe there's any reason to reorder the agenda.
No.
Okay. If you would, please read the format and hearing and order of testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to briefly describe the procedures of the Commission. The proceedings of the meeting are being recorded, so please step forward to the microphone when you speak and give your name and address for the record. The standard order of each case is as follows. After the introduction of the request by city staff, the applicant and their consultants will provide information on the request. The opening presentation by the applicant shall be limited to 10 minutes unless additional time is granted by the Commission. The applicant shall have 3 additional minutes for closing testimony if requested. We will then ask to hear from supporters of the request. We will then ask to hear from opponents of the request. We will then ask to hear from anyone else who wishes to speak on the request. Testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes each unless additional time is granted by the Commission. City staff will then make their recommendations on the request. In order to reduce the time necessary to hear an application, references to printed material, including staff reports and applicable findings, shall not be read into the record. unless directed by the Commission. The Commission will close testimony from the floor. The Commission will then discuss the proposal, then publicly make its determination with reasons. The form of the motion shall be positive, that is, the motion shall be made to accept the request as presented or with modifications, stipulations, or conditions. A final vote will be taken with ayes in favor, nays opposed. The chairman shall announce the results of the vote, specifying the number of votes cast in favor and the number of votes cast against. The following documents are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration at this meeting: the City Code of the City of Jefferson as amended, the Comprehensive Plan Map and Land Use Map, copies of applications under consideration, a list of property owners to whom notices were sent, the affidavit of publication of the public notice in the newspaper, copies of drawings and or plans renderings under consideration, the letters of Miranda from staff reports, minutes of proceedings, correspondence or other materials submitted by the public or the applicant, rules of procedure for the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. These items are public record and available for inspection in the Department of Planning and Protective Services or through the Office of the City Clerk. Please be advised that any items that are presented, distributed, or otherwise received pertaining to the cases under consideration become the property of the Commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, petitions, and letters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ian. At this time, I will entertain an adoption of the agenda. Commission has the option to reorder if they wish. I don't think it's necessary, but we will entertain a motion.
Move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? What's our numbers? 1, 2, 3, 6. Motion carries 6-0. Ms. Beth has been nice enough to provide us with our minutes from the January 9th, 2020 meeting. They're in your packet, and when you've had a chance to look over them, if there is no corrections or amendments, I will entertain a motion.
I move to adopt the minutes as presented.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We do have some communication this evening. It is regarding case number P00001. I'll get that before it's all over with. We have a letter of correspondence from Mr. Frank Young. Frank Young at 933 Sumter Place. His email is provided in the packet. I believe from what city staff has mentioned that they are in favor. City staff also received this drawing. Was delivered to City Hall, and no one has signed it. So we have an unknown constituents' comments. So I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of those two comments. Any questions? Okay. We'll move on to new business and public hearings. We open the floor to case number P20001, 3520 West Edgewood Drive, a preliminary PUD plan. It's a request filed by the Jefferson City Medical Group, the property owner, for a preliminary PUD plan to construct a 28,000 square foot surgery center. Is there someone who'd like to come up and present this case? All right, I'm off tonight. Sorry. Ian, please go first.
You're fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to point out the location of the property. The property is located along West Edgewood here, in Harper's Ferry here. A notable intersection would be just Wildwood, which is just to the east of the property. So here's the property. The zoning of the property is PUD, planned unit development, with residential to the north, PUD to the west and east, and residential and commercial to the south. And just here's a closer photo of the property. The The property was subdivided in the early 2000s, 2002 and 2003, and there have been other PD plans that have been proposed over the last several years, the last one being in 2008. That's just for your information. Here's the site plan, the proposed site plan. There will be parking that exists on all three sides of the building. Here's the building in the center here, with Harper's Ferry and Edgewood here. Parking will exist on all three sides of the building. Sidewalk will be constructed along West Edgewood Drive here, connecting the already existing sidewalk in front of the restaurant to the west, all the way to the intersection of Harper's Ferry. Sidewalk is required along Edgewood. Sidewalk is not required along Harper's Ferry. Signage, the signage details are not finalized at the moment, but there will be 3 monument signs located in the corner and then by the 2 drive entrances. There will be 1 driveway off of Edgewood and 1 off of Harper's Ferry here. Lighting will adhere to the CO zoning district requirements, which allows up to 2 foot candles for 90 degrees cutoff. Now, back in 2007, 2008, there was an issue with buffer yard because of the proposed restaurant that was later built. That buffer yard, a buffer yard was installed with a row of trees, and the applicant has not proposed any change to that buffer yard area that is currently in place. It appears to be sufficient to meet the requirements needed. This is just a closer view of the site plan, and I've taken some pictures of the buffer yard area so that you can see that. That is from Harper's Ferry, and then this one is from just the other end of the property to the west. Yes, this is on the north side of the property along here. And the applicant and their consultants are here to answer any questions, present to you. And if you have any questions for city staff, I'd be happy to go over those.
Thank you, Ian. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Ian or other city staff at this point? Mr. Wade, do you have anything at this point?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any questions for city staff? Okay, we'll try this again. Is there anyone here who would like to present this case? If so, please come forward and state your name and address to the record. I will tell you that pursuant to the city's regulations, we'd like to try to limit you to 10 minutes for your opening. We don't have a whole lot of other folks here tonight, so we'll indulge you a little bit, but
Okay.
let's not run it over too far.
Okay.
Awesome.
Mr. Chair and members of the commission, my name is Mark Hansen. I'm principal at Mohagan Hansen Architects in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And
I actually will need the whole address. I apologize, but it'll have to be read off.
I'm sorry.
Your address.
1012 Oaks Center Drive, Suite 200, Wayzata, Wayzata, 55391.
Thank you.
Yep. And I'm the principal in charge of the project for Jefferson City Medical Group for the new surgery center. And what we wanted to do today is just take an opportunity, and did a real good job of presenting the project, but we just wanted to give you a little bit more information on the project. We have a small little presentation. I'm going to have Ben Valier join us. He's the president and CEO of Jefferson City Medical Group. And we can go through and he can give a few words here in a minute about the beginning of the project and how we got going on this. Then I just wanted to go through a small little presentation. And if technology works here, we do have a video. We did finally get it to work. And if not, I'm going to turn my computer around and you can at least see it. And we wanted to be able to show the video so that the council, or the commission understood what we were trying to build on the site. With the 3D images today, you can really prepare some really nice graphics that allow you to visually see what we're going to build on the site before it's actually built. So with that, I'm going to have Ben join me here real quick, and we'll go from there.
Mr. Chairman, committee staff, or city staff, sorry, commissioners, great to see you. Ben Vallier, CEO for JCMG. I'm not the president. He gave me a little more credit than I deserve. We do have a physician president, Dr. Patrick, who had hoped to be here tonight, but he wasn't able to. So I'm here instead, and appreciate your time and attention.
Do me a favor, give us your address, please.
Personal or business?
Whichever one you prefer.
140 Palisades Drive, Jefferson City. So just real quickly, for those of you who aren't familiar with the outpatient surgery environment, we see more and more patients and insurance companies and employers wanting to get things done in a convenient boutique-type setting. We've had a surgery center in Jefferson City for greater than 20 years, and we've been looking at this project for at least since I've been here over the last 5 years. So we're very excited to bring for our employees a better place to work, a new platform for us to help recruit great new physicians to the community, and most importantly, a place where we can take excellent care of patients. We want to keep patients here in Jefferson City. We don't want them to go into Columbia, and we want to attract them from other communities so they can bring their tax dollars and everything else to our community. So that's really our goal with this project. Like I said, we've had a surgery center for a long time, and it's fine, but it's over 20 years old now, and we'll show you, I think, some pictures of it here in a second, but we think it's definitely time for something a little bit bigger, a little bit more friendly for customers and patrons in Jeff City.
I'll just give you a quick little overview. And what we did is we were initially hired to try to expand the existing surgery center. And we looked at the existing surgery center, which is kind of hidden on the east side of the campus, on the west end, has a west entry. Does this have a pointer here? Yeah, right in here is the entry to the surgery center. It's very nondescript. The patient pickup area is not covered. As Ben said, it's been here for 20 years. And what we wanted to take a look at was how could we improve the surgery center? We initially looked at the existing surgery center sits here. We have three existing ORs. There's 2 procedure rooms. And so we tried to take a look at expanding the facility back down into this area. And after doing that, an evaluation of the flow, and the surgery centers are very complicated in terms of the flow and the process of how you bring patients through, it became really cost prohibitive to do the expansion because the facility's been open for 20 years. The codes have changed, the requirements have changed, the equipment has gotten larger, they're doing more and more procedures are being approved in surgery centers. So we looked at this and it just became cost prohibitive. So we looked at evaluating the facility at a new site. And so the current site of Jefferson City Medical Group is right here off of Stadium, or Edgewood. And if you go down the road here, we're looking here at Harper's Ferry, which is about 2 miles away. And Jefferson City Medical Group had owned the facility for over 10 years. They had looked at other different developments to be proposed for this site. As we were saying or as Ian was saying, to the north of the site, there's a residential area. It's buffered pretty heavily, which was really kind of nice, but it was really, there's a lot of water requirements associated with this particular site, and we also have, I forgot to mention, we have our civil engineer here if we have questions, Wes Bolton from Allstate, to answer any other questions on the site itself. But what we looked at trying to develop the surgery center and tried to take a look at creating, as Ben said, a facility that really would serve the area of Jefferson City and the patients that are served by Jefferson City Medical Group. So we went back and looked at a variety of different options, and I think Ian had explained these. These are the sites. This is this heavy buffer area, which we on purpose left alone. We wanted to be able to maintain that buffer between the new building and the residents to the north. And as we develop this is a site plan. It's colored, and it has, right now, it has our preliminary analysis for our landscaping layout, and we're going to continue to develop that as we go through the project. But as Ian was saying, we brought all the service in on the north side of the property. We've already reviewed this with the fire department, and it provides all the setbacks and all the surface coverage that we need for the roads to be able to take care of the building in case of a fire. The patients will come off of Edgewood here, and they'll come into the site, and they'll be parking in the front area of the site, which is on the east and south. And we also have a patient drop-off area here, and then we also have a patient pickup area, which are extremely important. And if you remember the slide I showed you previously, they had no pickup area at the current surgery center. It's very hard to bring patients out after they've had surgery, not have a covered walkway. So it was extremely important to have that patient drop-off and patient pickup area for the patients. So the building's set up in here. The property line's pretty close. We're about, I think, 20 feet away from the west property line. This is where the building sits. And as we go through this is, again, a view coming off and into the site from Edgewood Boulevard here. You can see the surgery center back here, and I'm going to play this video now. Let me just kind of go here. I'm going to turn this around. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but the graphic may not work, and I think I was going to try to play it here. And this is a video that, as we develop projects in Revit today, you have the ability to be able to make a 3D movie out of it. And we took the software, and this just provides you with an opportunity to take a look at what we have. So I'll just kind of narrate this a little bit. Maybe you can take a look at this video here. I don't know if you can see that one or not. Technology is great when it works, right? If you can see it.
Yeah, just go ahead and proceed with what you have.
You're just walking around the site. This is the entry to the surgery center here. And that's the drop-off area. This is the pickup area on the backside. The waiting area is on that southeast corner, providing a lot of natural light to the facility. If you've ever been to the current facility, it's a very small waiting area. This is the staff entry here on this side. Again, patient pickup area. This is a staff area for area to be able to go outside and have lunch for outdoor space. This is just walking down the sidewalk, and again, that's the pickup area. That'll be a covered entry or covered pickup area for your patients to be able to have their park underneath and be able to load the patient. This is the waiting area that'll be facing south and east. And this is the drop-off area here to the left of the drawing. Again, it has a covered canopy that will be able to protect the cars as they drop off patients. These windows here are the kind of the pre-op area in the plan. Now we're running around the west side of the building, which will have all of your service mechanical area. We have a covered area on the back side for, not covered up, we've covered up the trash area. We have an emergency generator back there, transformer. There's going to be an oxygen tank, a bulk oxygen tank back there, and we've provided space on the back side of the building for that. This is just the aerial photograph or image of the building. That's going to continue to loop, but we're not going to do that. Okay. So maybe we can cut that off. So kind of the current status of the project, we just wanted to give you a little update here. We're in the process of submitting it through for the PUD process, which is tonight, the presentation, and then we have the other presentation on the 16th to the City Council. We're in the process of designing the building right now, going through the review with the user groups and trying to get the documents prepared. We're in the process of probably trying to bring a contractor on board to kind of help with the cost estimating of the project. And we're trying to get that done around June, bid the project, and hopefully, if everything goes well with the City Council and the project's approved, we'd probably start in July of this year, and it would probably be completed in about a year. And with that, we'll just stop. And if we have any questions, please let us know. And like I say, we have Wes Bolton here, who is a civil engineer. If you have any questions regarding the site and how it's laid out, regarding anything associated with the engineering of it, he'd be more than happy to address those questions for you.
Does this process, you have to get a certificate of need from the state of Missouri?
No, you do not.
You do not? Okay, got it. I was just curious.
And this is a replacement of their existing surgery center, but they'll have to go through the licensing of it, but they do not have to get a significant, or CON.
And in the back, I'm assuming that's the extension of that, the northwest side of the property line, there's like a part, is that for emergency turnaround?
No, what it is as you bring in the box trucks for delivery, we wanted to be able to provide an area where they could swing in and then back up into the area. There's no loading docks. We had several discussions about bringing semis into the site. There will be no semis into the site. The facility will be serviced by box trucks.
I have one question. I'm assuming this is just the surgery center, so the existing facility will stay and be used, and I guess the surgery center area will be reoccupied in different ways.
Yeah, I think what they're going to end up doing after this surgery center is up, they'll decommission that piece, they'll move all the surgeries over to this, and then what they do with that space, whether they're going to expand clinic services, I mean, maybe Ben could talk to that, but I would imagine it's going to be repurposed.
Yeah. It's always been a nice-looking facility and on a good corner there, so I assume that you guys would continue to stay. So, any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next, we will open up to the floor. We have three processes here. We ask if there's anyone to speak in favor, anyone to speak in opposition, and anyone that would just like to speak on that request. So we'll open up the floor now. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of this request? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this request? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Lastly, we'll ask, is there anyone who would like to speak on this request? If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Again, seeing none. At this time, we will close public testimony. I did have somebody?
I just wanted to add, if I may, and I'll give you my address again if I need to, but we did have a community meeting where we've invited the folks within the appropriate radius to come. We had the architects, engineers, and everybody from our organization. We did not have anyone show up, so I think I neglected to mention that during my part, so I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you. Again, at this time, we will close public testimony. Anna, are you giving the staff report? Ian, staff report, please.
Staff recommends approval of the proposed preliminary PUD plan. The proposed use of the property is consistent with the land use pattern found along West Edgewood Drive, with low-impact commercial uses transitioning into residential neighborhoods. The existing buffer between the residential properties to the north appears to be sufficient to buffer residences from the proposed use, and there is a recommended form of motion below.
Okay. Do the commission members have anything for Ian? Okay. Mr. Wade, anything from you at this point?
Very briefly, as far as site improvements, the stormwater, for stormwater drainage and stormwater quality, there has been a extended detention basin proposed to accommodate stormwater for the site. Access to the site will be, as indicated previously, from West Edgewood Drive and Harper's Ferry. A sidewalk has been proposed along West Edgewood Drive. Sewers and utilities exist in the vicinity, and also streetlights and fire hydrant also exist in the vicinity, and engineering staff would also recommend approval of this request.
All right, thank you, Shane. Does staff have any questions for Shane?
I have one question, just curiosity. Does all of the surface water in the parking lot and, like, say, roof water run into that detention basin?
I believe it's proposed that the majority of everything would go to the basin, yes.
It's like a holding pond and then it settles from there?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Any other questions for Shane at this point? Okay. Seeing none, we will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the approval of the preliminary PUD plan with the establishment of an underlying zoning of CO office commercial for the purpose of determining usage and for the signage and lighting.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. This will be forwarded to the city council. Okay. What date will this be at the city council?
March 17th
March 17th,
at 6 p.m. in this room.
6 p.m. in this room. If the motion is approved,
It is March 16th, excuse
Okay.
me.
we'll go back again. March 16th.
March 16th,
Are we
6
sure?
p.m. here in this room.
Okay, March 16th, in this room at 6 p.m. City Council will make their determination. If it is approved, will there be a reason for the applicants to come back if they don't change anything? It is a preliminary. Do they need to come back for the final?
For the final PD plan is approved administratively through city staff, the normal review that we have in reviewing commercial development proposals.
Okay. Very good. Thank you all for coming tonight. It is approved and will be at the City Council meeting on March 16th. Thank you all. It's all right. I don't know where my head's at tonight. We're going to wait for Mr. Vaughn to get back. He had to step out for just a minute. Eric, do you want to go ahead and proceed? I mean, we're not voting on anything else that is going, so if we want to go ahead and get started, and Dale will make it back when he's, there he is, perfect timing. Okay, we are moving on to other business. Mr. Vaughn is back. That's why we announced it as a record. We noted you left. We noted you came back. Right. We are moving on to other business. I think we're working on the comprehensive plan work session, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Anna, please have at it.
Okay. Thank you. So as Eric and I mentioned during the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, we will be having these theme discussions about topics relevant to the comprehensive plan, and this is all in preparation for the draft plan that we're currently in process with here in Phase 3. And we just believe that this supplementary work will help produce a good draft, and it's also in preparation for the public engagement that will be in the next phase, where the public will review the draft comprehensive plan. So today's themed discussion is about the housing environment. So first, I'm going to go over some housing statistics and information that staff have compiled in preparation for the comprehensive plan. Then I am going to go over some of our draft intentions for the housing chapter, and then we want to hear from the Planning and Zoning Commission, hear your feedback on what we have drafted, and then at the very end, Eric will give a short presentation about a neighborhoods mapping exercise that he has conducted. So, fundamentally, why is housing important? Why are we talking about housing? Well, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a theory categorizing and prioritizing human needs, it ranges from self-actualization at the very top, which focuses on reaching one's potential and goals, to physiological needs at the very bottom. The very base core needs that humans need includes air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, and reproduction. So housing is a very base fundamental need that humans need, and everyone should have access to appropriate housing. You also might have heard that there's a lot of housing issues going on. It's a national crisis. It's a local crisis. People might say that renters can't afford to buy a home. People are spending too much of their income on housing. The housing I want doesn't exist. But through all of those declarations of feelings, I have kind of come to the conclusion that it is a three-pronged problem involving economics, social issues, and the built environment. So I am going to be going over the housing information that I have gathered in these three categories to showcase what we have discovered. Also, quick highlight about the community results that we have gathered from our process for the comprehensive plan. This is a quick review of what I talked about last meeting. About 50% of the participants says that Jefferson City does have a variety of housing options, including rental and ownership opportunities, but 25% of participants do not believe that Jefferson City has a variety of housing options, including rental and ownership opportunities. Other points that the public made during this process around this topic includes that people do tend to have a positive outlook on their own neighborhood, but that there is a common understanding that there are areas of improvement in Jefferson City. Participants said that people who are in the market for mid to upper price homes can find the housing that they need, but people who are in the market for rental or more affordable options have a more difficult time. The comprehensive plan process, we don't really believe that we've reached a lot of low-income individuals or people from neighborhoods that we know to have certain housing options, so that's something to consider. And also, absentee landlords and code enforcement were brought up quite frequently. Also, from an economic perspective, during our public engagement process, housing was brought up. We asked this prompt, and 75% of participants believe that Jefferson City's economic success depends on accommodating to growth and demand trends. Demand trends can include preferences for housing, workplace environment, lifestyles that could affect the built environment, or other job opportunities. And workforce housing was something that was brought up quite frequently. So now on to some factors about the built environment. This is a trend showing the growth of housing units in our community. As the population grows, so does the housing units. And as of today, we have roughly, a little under 19,000 housing units with a homeowner vacancy rate of 4.1 and a rental vacancy rate of 8.5. Now, according to a report published by the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, a healthy vacancy rate is between 7 and 8%, and a healthy homeowner vacancy rate is less than 2%. So our homeowner vacancy rate is higher than recommended, and then the rental vacancy rate is around the recommended rate. Now, according to for tenure, we have about 58% of the occupied structures in Jefferson City are owner-occupied, and 42% of the occupied structures are renter-occupied. So considering this is not out of the ordinary for communities in mid-Missouri. Now I'm going to be going over types of structures, and this is a trend for the types of structures between 1990 and now. As you can see, predominantly made up of single-family homes. And this is more of a detailed look of that multifamily category, which is 2 units or more, and the larger type of structures, which are 5 or more units, are more prevalent, according to the rest of the types of structures. Yep. Yeah, it's the 1 unit, the big blue at the very bottom. Now, I think looking at this information in this sort of breakdown is easier to consume. You can see that in 1990, about 56% of our housing stock was single-family, 7% duplex, and 20% mid to high density structures. And today, our housing stock is about 65% single-family homes, 7% duplexes, and 27% mid to high density structures. And I also looked at what we're calling the Jefferson City metro area, because there are a lot of subdivisions outside of city limits that still are very much a part of our community, but isn't included into the data when the census data collects it, because it's not technically in the city limits. So 73% of the housing stock in this metro area, which includes all of Cole County and the southern part of Callaway County, 73% single-family homes, 5% duplex, and 18% mid to high density structures. And yep. So any reasons for red flags or discrepancies in this data could be because of the lack of information of demolitions from the Census Bureau, or the disconnect between ACS data, which is a American Community Survey, and the decennial census. One's more about estimates, one's more of a serious number count. And
So Anna,
yeah.
I would think one of the biggest things is the impact of the tornado, especially on the rental.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Eric has done an analysis on that, so he could probably speak more to exactly how many structures were lost and how many of them were rental.
Yeah, and I don't recall the exact numbers. I can speak extensively about the tornado. Probably even have a presentation if the committee were interested in seeing that. The number of units that are lost, quite honestly, is there's a lot that were lost because of the Hawthorne Park apartments. Okay, but our understanding is they plan to rebuild, and so that's literally the highest thing on my fear list is if they were not to rebuild for one reason or another. But there's no indication of that. They are kind of taking their time, I believe. But once they get rebuilt, the vast majority of the lost units will have been rebuilt. And the actual number of lost units, including the school buyout area, so houses that otherwise probably would have been occupiable, hovers right around 50 or 60, I think, housing units. And so it sounds like a big number with a community of many thousands of housing units. It's a fairly small percentage, and so it was bad. It was a bad event. But in terms of actual impact on the housing, number of housing units, it's quantifiable and at a fairly minimal level given the scope of housing in our community.
Thank you, Eric. So now I kind of want to talk about how the zoning districts affect the housing environment. Well, for single-family zoning, the single-family zoning districts made out of RS1, RS2, RS3, and RS4, that makes up 40% of our community, and that is the largest land use group that we currently have here in Jefferson City. Whereas multifamily, the RD, RA1, and RA2 makes up 6% of our community, and you can see the chart there of exactly what type of uses are allowed in each zoning district. But we also need to consider that multifamily structures are permitted in commercial zones. The commercial zones, which make up 12% of our community, MU1, which is the mixed-use districts, and then CO, C1, C2, and C3. You can see the chart there. Yes, limited, but there still are opportunities for multifamily housing to be in commercial zones. City staff, we do assume that there are not enough zoning allowances, whether that's prevalence of the physical property being zoned properly or awareness of what can be done in which district to accommodate the demand for multifamily housing. But we will be conducting an additional analysis, a more detailed look at this situation to see if this assumption is true. Now I'm going to move on to economics. And as mentioned before, affordable housing is a topic brought up a lot nationally and locally, but the term can be used interchangeably in three circumstances. So there's just the general word affordability, which means that you should not be spending more than 30% of your income on your housing. Whether you're low, middle, or high income, that is the industry standard for what is considered affordable for your housing. And then there is middle housing, and these are households that don't qualify for any public assistance, but the household isn't making, let's say, more than six figures. You know, it could be your teachers, your police officers, your state workers, anyone in there who needs appropriate housing or workforce housing, starter homes, things like that. And then there is low income or special needs housing, which includes the public housing or the housing assistance programs. So it's up for us to determine which one or multiple of these categories are Jefferson City residents really advocating for.
Go back to that slide real quick. Just
Yeah.
a quick question. I'm not tracking you when you say affordability, 30% of your income.
Yep.
What do you mean by that?
So that means your rent or your mortgage, your utilities, and if you're really working your budget well, that could mean any insurance or taxes for your property. That is how much you should be spending on your housing.
So you're talking about a monthly payment.
It's like a bank
Yeah.
qualifying you.
Well, and I just did the math on that. If you had $25,000 per year at 30%, you're at $625 per month. But that's not including utilities. That would be total, right? Is that what you mean by that, like affordable housing?
Say what, just repeat yourself.
So if a person made $25,000 per year and that was 30% of their income, that would be 620. Basically, works out to $625 per month for their housing. But that would. You would want that to include your utilities and insurance as well. So in reality, you're less than that, which is kind of hard to do, I feel. Like if somebody was going to build a brand new property, they would almost have to get some sort of government assistance in order to make that happen, because then the numbers wouldn't work out. But
that was my point.
And
Sorry.
the 30% standard has been around for a long time, and I don't really know how it was invented, but it's supposed to allow you other room in your budget for the other needs that you have. So, did I answer the question? Or did Dale helped? So then the median owner-occupied unit in Jefferson City is $149,567. And median rent is $684 per month, and these numbers reflect the metro area, which includes Jefferson City, Cole County, and southern Callaway County, so remember that. So now I'm going to talk about unaffordability in Jefferson City. According to just simply considering those median numbers, the household would need to make $27,373 to afford the median rent here in the Jefferson City metro area. There are roughly 7,509 households that make $29,999 or less. And households making that amount or less are in an income bracket considered to not be able to or barely be able to afford the median rent in Jefferson City. 22% of Jefferson City metro area households fall into this bracket. And considering the median home value, a household would need roughly $49,856 to afford the median home value. There are roughly 13,924 households that make that $49,999 or less. And households making that amount are in an income bracket considered to not be able to or barely be able to afford the median home in the Jefferson City metro area. And 30% of households fall into this bracket. And I do want to note that this 30% for the median home value significantly goes up when we only consider households within the city limits, alluding to the fact that most of the cost burden households are within the city limits. And then I personally hypothesize more city center neighborhoods, and Eric has some maps later on to also allude to that assumption. Yeah.
So would that mean then that 48% would either be above that or below that?
Yeah, and I have those numbers later on in the presentation as well. That's okay. And on that city-centered neighborhood topic, according to the Community Development Block Grant Consolidated Plan, the majority of Jefferson City's rental and housing stock was built before 1980, and those properties tend to need ongoing maintenance and repair, and in some cases, more housing code enforcement. And according to the 2018 Impediments to Fair Housing Choice, 21% of Jefferson City households just within the city limits are actually cost burdened, which means they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing. So consider those possible connections between these facts and some of the information, some of the things that the public was advocating for in our processes. Now on to public housing. This includes low-income families, elderly, and persons with disabilities. There are there are 318 public housing units that includes both apartments and homes in Jefferson City, and both the Housing Authority and CMCA distribute housing choice vouchers. Now, we've had some conversations with the Housing Authority, and they told us that there's roughly a 4-year waiting list for public housing, and there are also roughly 750 applications in queue for the public housing. Now, that does not mean that there are 750 families or individuals out there in need of housing and can't get it, but each apartment complex that accepts them has an application. So one family could put out 8 applications and it gets counted 8 times. And then according to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, nationwide the median wait time for public housing is around 9 months, but the public housing wait list has an average size of 834. So our wait list, is under nationwide median size, but the wait time is significantly more than the national average. Now, on to people who can afford housing here in Jefferson City. Again, simply considering those median numbers, the household income to afford the median rent, $27,000. There are roughly 26,065 households in Jefferson City that make $30,000 or more. And then there are 77% of households in that income bracket considered to be able to afford median rent. And again, the home value, there are roughly 19,650 households making $50,000 or more, which means that there are 58% of the households here in Jefferson City in an income bracket considered to be able to afford the median home value. And remember that these statistics, they don't factor in preferences for housing, financial or other lifestyle factors that heavily contribute to people's housing choice. But yes, most of Jefferson City households are doing well. But the goal of, community development is always to keep the happy people happy, making sure that there are enough housing options for people of all price ranges to live comfortably in their lifestyle choices, but also helping the people who are disadvantaged, because there will always be people in those groups, but how can we set them up for as much success as possible? So then, real quickly, I'm going to bridge the connection between the physical and the economic to the social considerations, which is my last point. So I'm briefly going to talk about housing market factors. And the National League of Cities, they have produced a report on affordable housing, and this considers the various connections that make up the housing market. So it really helps paint a picture of the strengths and weaknesses of a community's housing environment. So in reviewing this list, we want to showcase the interconnectedness of the housing environment, because there is a lot at play in regards to health for neighborhoods and such. So I'm not going to go over the few lists, but just go over a few highlights to keep in mind in light of all the data that I have just talked about. So we have to remember about fluctuations in job and population, both growth and loss. Jefferson City is a small growth community, but we're always going to remain relevant due to state government, building material costs. It's more expensive for developers to build a house, thus they are selling it for a higher price. Availability, costs, and regulation of land. Jefferson City's physiography can make it quite difficult, rock, terrain, etc. And the zoning code heavily influences where and what types of uses are built. Tenant protections is something that they suggest to consider. How do we make sure that the housing stock is of quality to make sure that customers and property owners both stay happy? And the perceived quality of schools. We've heard both positive and negatives about the school environment during our public processes, and we do know that school choice heavily influences where people choose to live and thus where people spend their money. So keeping all that stuff in mind. So now lastly, for some things that are harder to quantify, trends. We have to think about design trends and development trends, whether it's universal design, tiny homes, modern aesthetic, more traditional aesthetic, lifestyle trends. People want to walk more, people have more pets, people want proximity to certain amenities as they go through different stages of their life. The public engagement process suggested that keeping up with trends is very important, and we have to question, can Jefferson City provide for all types of trends? Also, generational needs. Generations want different things at different times. Different age groups want different things at different times. We have to consider if Jefferson City can favor towards all types of groups. Consider how living through certain movements affects how people live their lives or how they raise their children. Baby boomers and the highway expansion, Generation X and suburban ideology, and the crime tsunami, millennials and the tech boom, and the beginning shift of television from that suburban ideology to more people like Friends living in apartments like Friends and Seinfeld, and then Gen Z to right now. We had the housing bubble of 2006, city center gentrification is more popular, and there's the student loan debt crisis to consider. So can Jefferson City provide for all these type of lifestyles? We have to keep that in mind. And then lastly, this is something that came up a lot during our public engagement processes, NIMBYism, which is the characterization of opposition by residents to a proposed development or activity. Specifically, opposition is rooted in the fact that the subject development or activity is in close proximity to them. Typically, people show tolerance for the development or activity just in a different location, aka far away from them in the city. So thinking about that very scientific sounding definition, people tend to have this viewpoint towards rental housing or low-income housing, certain types of transportation features, and we just need to consider how this mindset affects the built environment. So it's our job to consider all of the complexities and interrelatedness of the stuff that I just presented. And what I want to know from you guys is, are we correct in focusing on these themes for the portion of the comprehensive plan? One item to note: diverse housing options. Participants of the community engagement process advocated for this a lot, and it promotes affordability and ensures that there are wide housing needs for everyone. Whether you're low, middle, or high income, you can have the housing for you. Infill development and redevelopment. This leverages underutilized land in regards to development costs and environmental benefits. These two things can help in those categories. It also promotes mixed income neighborhoods. Tools to maintain a healthy housing stock. When you have design or property maintenance tools that help rental and ownership properties, that's good for both the tenant or the landowner and investors. Education. We want to make sure that there are enough resources for property owners and developers to maintain and have quality properties, and education can also promote an anti-NIMBY rhetoric, and then community identity and pride. So it's become very, very clear to us working at City Hall and during our public engagement processes that people are very, very proud of Jefferson City. And pride equals more investment and the retention of residents. Commissioner Jack Deacon, last meeting, he talked about not wanting to be Columbia or not wanting to be St. Louis. And he's absolutely right, because those places already exist. But embracing and enhancing like these small town amenities highlights Jefferson City's place in mid-Missouri, because people absolutely want that. You know, we can see that every single day. So that involves that community pride and identity aspect, and it also might help with anti-NIMBY attitudes. So I'll repeat my prompt, because I know I've done a lot of talking, but are we correct in focusing on these themes? But also feel free to let us know if there's anything else we should be working on or anything else that needs more research.
So I
Thank
guess
you.
the community identity and pride, the historic preservation and adoption of historic districts
Correct.
is part of that too.
I think one of the comments that I'll make, and I've said that before, is that there's two comments. One is our terrain in this community always hurts development, and there's nothing we can do about that. That's a fact. But the one thing that I do believe that's hurting our community is the lack of enforcement on codes. As you drive around this community and you look at the existing housing stock, things are not being enforced. Now, I agree that every property doesn't have to be up to 100% code compliant, but I've just seen this continued decline of properties of people not maintaining them. I think the realtor sitting in this room may or may not disagree with me, but I think that, you know, as a community, we ought to look at trying to, you know, take that task on and beautify those properties more, or enforce some codes and go on and get rid of them. And we know of one major violator in the downtown area that we're still sitting on. So I just think that, you know, it doesn't really fall on your all's shoulders. It's an enforcement thing, and it's a hard task these days. I understand that. But I do think that's one thing that we could really help our community do, is by cleaning up our properties.
Yeah, I would also say, not even just residential. I go to like Walgreens and places on Missouri Boulevard or you know, in front of Walmart, and there's just trash everywhere. It's crazy. And I'm like, why is there so much trash everywhere? And I feel like it's almost, the business owners don't take pride in it either. You know, every time I go to Walgreens, there's literally trash all over the parking lot. So I don't know. Somebody needs to pick it up.
So with respect to compliance, I know this morning the Planning and Public Works Committee of the council talked about a regular inspection program, and I certainly agree that it needs to be beefed up. There's big problems in residential areas with non-compliance with ordinance.
Any other comments? And I appreciate your presentation. Where will you go from here with what you've given us thus far? What's the next step?
Yeah, since there are no objections to these themes being focused on in the comprehensive plan, we're going to work on the next topic. And we have plenty of language and research to back these things up, and you guys will see it more full-fledged in goals and objectives and strategies later when the draft plan is revealed.
Do we have code for tiny house? I know people have asked me about the storage unit or the storage container stuff, but do we have codes pertaining to tiny house at all?
And so, no, we do not. And it's kind of a two-pronged issue there. One is any zoning-oriented code. I don't think the zoning code prohibits tiny houses, but the lot standards and such are probably not very compatible with that idea. We've spoken about it a little bit, internally here, and would probably conclude that if someone wanted to bring forward a tiny house development, it would probably need to go in a PUD type of proposal. But the other half of the equation is building codes, and the building code requirements for certain sizes of structures and other things that are very difficult to meet with tiny houses. That's why when you watch about them on TV, they're often on wheels, because they basically, are they're basically trailers or mobile homes and things like that.
They're not allowed, but so if they're not allowed, they can just move them real quick.
Exactly, and so
run from the city.
My understanding is that the ICC, the organization responsible for drafting, building codes that the city, adopts, refreshes on a regular basis, are actually planning to incorporate, or maybe they already have a chapter or something dealing specifically with tiny homes, and recognizing that trend and putting in place certain safety requirements to accommodate it.
I definitely think it's something that we should look into and allow. I think a lot of people, especially millennials, and even myself, you look at all the stuff you have, and you move a couple times, you'll want to get rid of all of it. And I think that it would be nice to have a development like that, because it would be affordable and people could own their own house. And then also, I think there is a development somebody told me about in Springfield, and I think it is I don't want to say it's assisted. What do you call it? What's the term? Government funded. Whatever. It's a gated community. I believe it's in Springfield, and it's of tiny homes. Excuse me. So.
And there's a subdivision in the Kansas City area. Actually, it was a realtor that developed it. It's an entire subdivision of tiny homes, and he focused or geared it towards veterans.
Yeah, and maybe that's it.
Coleman.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the Kansas City area. I just know that he was a realtor up there, and now he's moved
Right.
So, I know the Affordable Housing Task Force that Community Action Agency called, they presented what they called the micro homes, and were promoting it for solutions related to homelessness and also affordability. I think one of the discussions was about the lot size as far as zoning would be maybe a problem here now. Is that something, do you remember if that was?
There was a discussion about the lot size and, being able to put a small 600 or 800 foot cottage type house on. There may not be a lot of them that are appropriate the way things are platted now.
So again, that's where you recommend if somebody is interested in that idea, it might be a PUD development to get around the lot sizes, but they could still turn around and subdivide it so each individual home could be sold. That's where you're going to get hung up, because you got the lot size requirement.
Within the context of a PUD plan, I think it's possible to have a subdivision that has smaller lot sizes.
So everybody would own their own lots?
I believe that there's possibilities in there, yes.
So what defines a tiny home? Is it less than 1,000 feet, or what's the number?
The standard tiny home is around 300, but the micro homes that Mike is talking about was around 800 square feet.
I'm too tall for that.
Yeah, and I think it would be, I like the idea of it, honestly. I think it would have to be restricted, so that people aren't like storing stuff outside, because that's where I find there being a problem. Yeah, you have this tiny home, but then you have a shed or a bunch of stuff outside, and it's going to become an issue. But yeah, obviously I don't think it could happen in like a already existing neighborhood. You're not going to go in there and just build a tiny home. But in the subdivision itself, I think it would work.
Interesting. Any other comments for Anna?
I do have a bit of a presentation. I'll try to be short. I know we're getting into the late
I was going
evening
to remind
hours.
city staff that we have a 10-minute limit on presentations.
Sorry.
I failed to mention that to the current city staff member that was speaking. Just giving you a hard time. What do you got for us, Eric?
Okay, so I wanted to do my presentation after Anna's because mine is more geographic in nature. I've produced some maps. In fact, I was going to turn off the center light here and maybe be able to see the maps a little better. But it kind of builds on some of what I'd presented at the last meeting. And, we've divided, we're trying to take a more detailed look at some of the property characteristics within Jefferson City. And to do this, we've divided the city up into what I've coined as neighborhood analysis zones. So took the town, divided it up into a whole bunch of smaller neighborhoods. Some of these are commercial in nature, some are residential. And at the last meeting, I presented when those developments were built, and so showed a progression over time. And this time, I wanted to focus specifically on some of the residential areas, and with some of the information that we have available, mostly through the county assessor's department, dealing with the average structure value, so how much a house. We've tried to weed the data out to be focusing specifically on the typical house, even though they might be converted to multiple units. And you'll see the maps here in a second. The ownership rate. So we've did a query within the computer, matching up the home address with the mailing address of where people get their tax bill, and come up with some statistics on how many houses within an area are owner-occupied versus renter-occupied. It's not perfect, but we have spot-checked it and found it to be fairly accurate within a fairly small margin of error. So we're pretty comfortable presenting it to you. And then the year-built calculation, so kind of showing the history of the town. But in the context of this discussion, we're really, as Anna said, we have a fairly old housing stock, and that can have a large impact on our housing situation. And also on other factors such as code enforcement, and I'll try to touch on that a little bit. I probably will raise more questions within my presentation than answers, but I wanted to present this information just so you kind of understand, where some of the problems are potentially, and be thinking about, maybe how to bring forward solutions for them. My last bullet point is, we're starting to think that maybe identifying certain strategic neighborhoods within the community, neighborhoods that are, for one reason or another, just need special attention, some TLC, and trying to come up with some specific recommendations for some of these areas. Maybe not individually, but maybe as a whole, but perhaps targeting city resources to these areas or other things that we could do to try to improve the neighborhoods. And so I'll move on to the first map. And so this is the residential building value. Again, the town is divided up into a whole bunch of different neighborhood analysis zones. You'll see that there's a lot of white on the map because there's a lot of other undeveloped or commercial properties which are not included in this particular visual. It's really focusing on the residential neighborhoods. So each one of those zones was drawn fairly meticulously around existing subdivisions or other notable kind of divider lines in the community. So over up in the right-hand corner, you can see the building value, starting at a $0 to $70,000 range, and then increasing, by about every $10,000 or $20,000. With the general idea being that the blue and the blue and blue-green are the areas of the town that have a lower building value. Yes, Dale? Yes, it is assessed value, and it excludes the property value, so it's solely on what the assessors have determined the structure value to be. And so, it's not much of a surprise, but some of the central city areas, some of the neighborhoods surrounding the downtown, you'll see the downtown shows up as a green, but the areas surrounding it are some of the darker blue, and so that's where some of the the lower valued structures are located. You can look across the community and see little islands of development. Some of them are older and have been there for many years, or may have just been built as a more affordable housing situation. But many of them are have been around for a while, and their value is reflected in the fact that they're older. The next visual I have here is the owner occupancy rate. Again, not a big surprise here, but it shows it visually that the central city area, the area surrounding the downtown, has some of the higher or lower owner occupancy rates, so that the higher rental areas. So the darker blue is the areas with the higher rental rates. And so the island of blue in the downtown area is reflected there. So literally looking at something on the effect of less than 30% owner occupancy, so a 70% rental rate in some of those areas or greater. I believe your presentation said it was is about 58% owner occupied across the community as a whole. Is that for the city or the urban area? Just the city. And so if you include the outside areas, that number would be higher. But yes. I think in an honest presentation, the number was fairly comparable in terms of owner occupancy versus renter occupancy across the area. Yep. This map, I think its purpose is to show that a lot of that is very concentrated in a specific area. And so instead of being spread out, which would be more ideal. And so the yellow neighborhoods would probably be the more ideal situation where you have a good mix of the two different types of uses. And then the next slide I have is the average year built. And so this is, again, the darker blue are the areas where there's the housing stock is older. Pre-1939 for some of the central parts of the city. Again, no surprise, Jefferson City started around the downtown and grew outwards. And the next slide I have is an attempt to show those three layers on top of each other and zooming in more on the downtown area. And so what I've actually tried to do here is make each layer transparent so that they stack, and the darker blue areas will stack to a darker blue, whereas if there's lighter blue areas, they don't stack quite as dark blue. And the idea being here is that this is an attempt at showing a visual representation of the neighborhoods that would probably be looked at for a strategic neighborhood type of discussion or analysis. I wanted to kind of point out some of these geographies because I think it's relevant, and if we actually move forward with this type of thing, I think it could lead to other things, such as focusing city grant or financial resources onto some of these areas. And so it's kind of an important topic that could be built into the comprehensive plan. And I'll step over here to this one to show the mouse pointer here a little bit. Again, the downtown area doesn't have a whole lot of residential uses in it, so it's kind of an anomaly and probably better to kind of ignore. There's a few houses and things like that, but the blue areas surrounding it are really the areas that are some of staff's greatest concern. These are the areas with low housing or low structure values, high rental rates, and very aged type of structures. So they're the most struggling neighborhood. There are other areas that have very similar age, but for one reason or another are not quite, don't rank quite as strong in the rental rates or the value. For example, out toward the west side, some of the neighborhoods off of West Main and West McCarty in that area, they still show up a blue, but not necessarily the deep dark blue. And as you go further out West Main Street, you'll see it starts to transition to a lighter green, and the situation is a little bit more stable. Along St. Mary's Boulevard, north of Missouri Boulevard, right here, There's a number of neighborhoods, again, that are ranking high in those categories. There is kind of a divider line between the two where the situation changes from, where the further west you go, the ownership rate increases, the values are a little bit higher. A lot of this deep blue right here is probably based on a very limited number of housing units. It's on the southern side of Missouri Boulevard, and a good portion of that is actually parkland. The south side neighborhood, literally extending from the highway all the way basically to Lincoln University, is basically falling into that blue category. There are some islands of some higher valued owner-occupied neighborhoods, such as along Adams Street. That's a nice little spot here that would probably be ideal for historic district type discussions. And just south of that is a deep dark blue. That is largely within the tornado school buyout area and what the hospital is looking forward to, and is actually identified within the south side plan as being a redevelopment area, which would support their activities. Yes, Dale?
School buyout. Forgive me if we've talked about this before, if this is common knowledge, but school buyout area, I'm assuming, is where the tornado hit all the homes next to the school, and
Yes.
they're looking at buying these properties?
They've actually purchased a significant number of properties. The Jeff City School District has. In fact, my last count, I think, out of about 50 properties in that area, within the first block, adjacent to the football field,
Right.
they've acquired about 35, a little over 35. So,
So what's their process?
I heard they have 44 contracts on 44 properties.
okay.
Which
So-
is great. See, and that's my problem. I don't have the paper. Sorry. I should read it. But so they're going to. Are they going through like a process? I'm glad that they're buying them because it looks terrible down there, and I'm assuming they probably wouldn't. The people that owned them probably wouldn't have fixed them up anyways. But are they going through a process right now of to demolish them?
Yes, they are. In fact, they've applied for demolition permits. They're doing them in chunks, I think. The first ones are literally a line of houses immediately adjacent to Stadium Boulevard. I suspect that will get the community's attention when those houses fall down. A lot of people, I think the community knows what's going on there, but it will be a very highly visible type of thing once those start coming down and are gone. And so,
Yeah, my understanding is the hospital is trying to acquire about a dozen houses also, coming
Okay.
from their direction.
and so a lot of that was laid out, and so here is a dark blue neighborhood, but there's also city plans in place that call it out as being a redevelopment area. And so, would it be a strategic neighborhood? Probably not, because what's the point of providing resources to something identified as a redevelopment area? And I think that probably should and could and should become a larger topic as we move forward with the comprehensive planning, especially when it comes to historic preservation discussions, is what is historic, what is old, and what is a redevelopment area. And if a property is within a designated redevelopment area, which should be looked at very closely before designating that to make sure it's not a historic resource, then its redevelopment is inevitable, and so it might be in ways to better focus city resources toward areas where improvements can be made as opposed to areas that are intended for redevelopment.
Have you seen any backlash from the Historical Society in that particular area? Is there? Are people like, no, don't tear them down, or are they like, okay, yeah, I feel like this is a good...
I'm not aware of any kind of official backlash. I think there's concern anytime structures come down. Every one of those have gone through the Historic Preservation Commission. I have not been present at those meetings, so I'm not aware of the discussions that have taken place, but they've approved them all. So at least all of them that have come to them, they're coming in chunks. So. To extend the geography here to the east side, of course, so the east side neighborhoods that are showing it blue, but that really kind of extends all the way out to what's called Wren's Addition. And so the neighborhoods that are, oh, dang it, I'm going to Ellis Porter Park, I believe, is just adjacent to that, and the DNR building and stuff. So that area is, fairly, it's aged. It's not the oldest neighborhood in town, but it's up there. There is an island, some areas that, because of the terrain, I think, were developed at later dates. But some of that extends across to the Clark Avenue area and even down Clark Avenue a ways. But, as Clark turns into Morrow Drive, you can see the neighborhoods, again, the owner occupancy rate and values tend to go up. And so anyway, that is really what I was hoping to present, is this idea of strategic neighborhoods. I have one more slide to address, and the chairman even brought it up, some of the code enforcement issue. At the staff level, we know where the code enforcement problems are. It is a continual struggle, a lot of the code enforcement problems have been around for a very long time, and quite frankly are in some of the same areas. Okay, and so I have a map here showing code enforcement activity. I'll ask you to ignore the colors of the different dots here. I put this together literally almost at the last minute this afternoon to try to show a correlation between some of these dark blue areas and code enforcement activity on the part of our staff. So the different colors and everything, they could, all manner of different kinds of code enforcement activities, from, trashing your yard or not mowing your yard, all the way up to you have a dangerous structure, just shown as a single dot here. But the frequency of dots across the community is higher within those areas that I showed as being blue. And we believe that, unless something is done to improve those neighborhoods, this will continue. One of the reasons we believe this is because when we look back at what previous planners did here at the city, the planner before me and the planner before her and quite literally the planner before him, there's references to trying to deal with code enforcement activities in these exact same neighborhoods. And so until we do something to change the game, to get a rental inspection program, a strong one in place, or to get some solid improvements to these neighborhoods, we believe that this activity will persist in the area. And we hear it quite frequently that we need more code enforcement. We're also handicapped in many respects as to what can be done on a city level with respect to enforcement. But this, if you switch back and look at the dark blue areas, and then match that up to those areas, there's just a strong correlation. And so that was what I was hoping to present to you. If you have any thoughts or words or questions, be happy to answer them. It's more of a thinking piece. If the idea of a strategic neighborhood is something that you believe is worthy of trying to insert into the plan, do more research on, we'd like to hear that too.
Any comments from commissioners? Eric?
I like the idea, but I just have a question. Have you thought, or is there, infrastructure? Have you thought of that component in some of these neighborhoods, that infrastructure improvements in neighborhood, like what the city could do, like with sidewalks? Because we drive through some neighborhoods that there's a significant difference in infrastructure than other neighborhoods. And I'm afraid it's probably the same neighborhoods that we're talking about. So that's why I was asking if...
Yes, and so the South Side neighborhood plan focused on that quite heavily. It identified streetscapes as being kind of a major component of a neighborhood's look and feel, and improving those streetscapes would go a long ways to hopefully encouraging property owners to up their game. It's not easy, of course. Resources are thin. We do have various funding. The city receives certain funding that has through for example, the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant Program through HUD, that has to be focused on lower income type situations. There's a lot of flexibility on how that gets applied. The city does a plan on how to apply it. But there have been areas where sidewalks have been installed. For example, along Clark Avenue, there was a sidewalk project recently. It looks a lot better, but it is only part of the equation. So
that's what I meant. I didn't mean that it was going to be the only thing to correct the problems, but it's sometimes an issue.
one of the things that, as people know that we're on this commission and they kind of think that we know a lot more than we really do, people ask questions about what's going on with the community and just general maintenance and things. And again, I'm not going to get on my tangent about code enforcement, but just simple things that people, bump into me here or there and they say, why do our streets look as bad as they are? That's the worst they've looked in 100 years. And I know some of it is resources, and I know that we use different materials today that maybe aren't as harsh as they were in the previous time that could withstand what we're doing, but I can't disagree with them. And it gets back to the overall value of your community and the beauty of your community when you're driving through potholes or you're looking at roads that are just absolutely in poor condition. Back to what you're saying, is that a part of why these areas that maybe aren't getting those resources, then the pride from the homeowner or the tenant or whatever, the occupant of those structures, say, well, look around what I've got to deal with to begin with. And so I'm trying to promote that if we all know that our town has struggles in growing because of our topography and the limitations with the rivers and things like that. But if we really want to sustain this community, we need to keep up with what we've got. And I really do believe that infrastructure is going to be a big one, and the council deals with it all the time, whether it's stormwater or those things that Shane deals with quite often. But again, I do think that some of the simple things is fixing streets and getting people to pick up trash out of their yard or whatever. I think those are simple things that really can be enforced and be looked at. Now, budgetary constraints are a whole other issue, not for us, but anyway, that's another one of my tirades. But I just, I really think there's opportunities here that we can do with what we've got. So, any other comments for Eric?
No, only that I agree with that approach. I mean, if you don't focus on something, it's not going to happen. So,
yeah, I think that the map's quite interesting. I'm a little bit taken back by where some of the most activity is. I wouldn't have guessed that. So it's kind of an interesting map. I hope it's fairly representative of what you guys find in your daily routines there. But very interesting map.
And for a last-minute deal, I think you did quite well.
We probably would have the ability to go into some more detail here. The mapping program, the program that the code enforcement officers have been using, it's fairly new. I think they've had it for about a year, and so it's really improving their efficiency. And I'd like to say that they are progressively getting better at this code enforcement thing. They're still handicapped in many regards. One of those handicaps appears to maybe be coming down a little bit with the rental inspection program that Mr. Lester referenced. But there's still a lot more out there. But they, my perspective is that they do good work for the resources and abilities that they have.
No, it's a nice tool, and glad that staff gets something that really supports what they're trying to do out there in the field, because I do understand it's a tough job. Okay, anything else on the comprehensive plan work session?
No.
None. Okay. Staff updates on prior cases?
We don't have any prior cases, but there was a case that was brought forward to the Board of Adjustment this last week about a temporary asphalt plant on the corner of Edgewood and 179 that was denied by the Board of Adjustment, for your information.
It didn't get any press, so the newspaper or no one was there. But there was a significant number of people. So if anyone asks you or references it, make sure you're kind of familiar. There was actually just over 20 people that spoke out against the proposal. Several residential neighborhoods that were fairly close proximity to a proposed asphalt plant, albeit a temporary one, but they didn't like the idea.
That was this last Tuesday. Conditional use, asphalt plants are a conditional use of the C2 general commercial zoning district, and so that's why it went to the Board of Adjustment. And now we have election of vice chair.
I'll go back to the prior cases. You said it was a temporary asphalt plant?
Their proposal was specifically for 99 days to allow it to be they called it out as intending it to be a temporary use. And so we don't have a permit or anything is specific toward a temporary use like that. And so it had to be treated like a normal use, but it would, because they were actually applying for it to expire, within 99 days after they started. And that for that reason, we call it out as being a temporary asphalt plant.
So again, so I'm clear on this, it was truly going to be a temporary situation?
Yeah, it would have been held to 99 days per condition placed on the conditional use permit.
Are we at liberty to ask what the purpose was to put it up for 99 days?
To pave a specific highway project that they received, that they bid on, got the favorable bid through MoDOT, paving of Highway 54 from Stadium Boulevard to the Miller County line. I believe they're looking for a new spot, and I think that they have other options that they're pursuing. I hope they are. So
interesting. Okay, as Ian said, our next item of business is the election of a vice chair. We're down to 6 of us. It's up to you all. We can either table it till we have more folks next month. I think everybody probably saw Eric's email this week. He's not been approached by any of us. I don't know if anybody wants to throw their name in the hat. We can deal with that, or I'll entertain any ideas this evening that you all have.
I believe you can nominate someone who's not here.
It's not that bad of a job, Ian.
I wouldn't be opposed to do it, but I would like to. I don't want to say anything now. Just throwing it out there. I know last time I was nominated, and I was going through some stressful real estate stuff. So I, at that time I didn't feel like I was prepared to do what he does, which is, it's not a hard thing to do, but it's, you got to know what you're doing. And I felt at that time I didn't feel like I was prepared to do that. So
that's a polite
that was a pretty easy job, if you ask me. But so, anyways, I would propose to table it until everybody's here, and then I will respond to. I didn't know we were voting.
Had a chance to be here, and they chose not to be here. I say let's nominate somebody and rock on.
Okay. Well.
There you go. So, with that being said,
We did one Penny. We did announce. Never mind. Penny was now not an alternate. She is.
I believe the only alternate left sitting is Mr. Vogt. I believe Emily Fretwell is still alternate, and so there's one vacant alternate position. So those two are not eligible to serve as vice chair, but anyone else is, except for, of course, the chair.
Even with
yes, you do.
Buddy, we're good. Yes.
Yeah, you got 6 people, so you're still within a quorum.
Okay. Any special procedural matter we need to go to, or does someone need to officially nominate Mr. Dale?
I think it's just a nomination. Someone nominate whomever, and
I nominate Dale Vaughn.
In a second.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. We want to discuss this or tell him how important this job is.
Do I vote on myself?
Penny's done this before.
Do I vote on myself?
That is a great question. Does he vote for himself?
I think so. I think it's a motion of the body. So yeah.
All right. We have a motion for Mr. Vaughn to be vice chair. We have a second. There was no discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your no-income position.
That's right.
It's
part
not
of that position is you have to be on time.
It's not that hard,
It's
so
a stressful position.
And
don't
that'll
worry.
be a script for you to read.
Yeah.
Please don't be gone next right off the back. Let me mentally prepare.
I do have a couple quick questions before we adjourn, just real quick, and I know we've been here long tonight, and I don't want to put salt into the wound, but I've been asked numerous times about what went on downtown with just tearing down the building and the city paying $200,000 out of our coffers, and where was the insurance companies or the ownership of this? And again, I'm not trying to throw salt in the wound. I don't know how to answer it, is what I'm getting at. And I keep saying, direct it to City Hall, and a few people say, I don't want to go up there because we spent $200,000 out of our coffer. Is that true?
I'm going to say yes. There was a deal negotiated by our administration where they looked at the situation. We had no idea what sort of insurance money was paid to Mr. Neidert, and there were legal issues going on between the two parties in the city, and the city councilor thought it's best to craft a negotiated deal between all three parties where the city was able to remove some of their liability by doing what they decided to do in terms of relieve Mr. Neidert of the property and take the responsibility of taking the building down.
So talking with a councilman about that, a big part, it sounded to me like was so it wouldn't go on for a long period of time further.
That's true. The I'll just call it possible litigation would have dragged things on longer. Whether that included the building coming down by our hand and the legal cases keep flying. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not sure what all sort of things could have happened. But the city does own the property now at 200 East High Street. Depending on what happens in the next week or two, we may own the additional building right next to it. We'll just have to wait and see. The engineers are looking at the wall, and we're ready to move forward with the demolition of 200 and 202 if we need to.
I feel like they may think that they're going to keep it. If I saw that before I got here, the people at 202 East High were cleaning the windows, and so I was like, that's weird. Why would you clean the windows if you didn't think that you were either going to keep the building or? It's a very nice building.
They were at city council. I was here. I was just observing. 2 times ago, 2 meetings ago, I think, and I'm not. Anyway, the lady got up and spoke to the city council and said they were here and willing to do whatever. They were ready to move forward type of thing, but the holdup was the other owner. But am I right that there was some way that they were going to recoup some of this money through?
Normally what we do when the building's declared dangerous and we demolish it, we will demolish it and put a special tax bill lien on the property, and in hopes that we get the money back if there's ever some sort of transfer. A lot of times those are properties that are abandoned in bad shape. People just walk away from them, or they're hidden behind a shell corporation, such as 200 East High Street, which we did not think we'd get any money out of it at all. The property owner did compensate us some money, but we own the property now. So we got something for our money at least, as opposed to just all of it go away. Because ultimately we would have to take it down due to, it's falling down now. And what happens with 202, it depends on how the progress goes that everybody agreed to. Wish I had a better story to tell, but it's quite the quagmire. It really is.
Yeah.
Well, you had attorneys involved, so we understand that.
Well, I think, and a big thing is what the city's going to do so it doesn't happen again, something like that, or if it does happen, it can be resolved quicker. And I guess there's still an issue about, we don't want on that property once it's down, whatever's built there, if it's built there, it should be consistent with the historic downtown. And right now, that's not in place.
With the city owning it, certainly, I cannot imagine the city would let something happen in terms of development that doesn't fit into the streetscape, the look and feel of the city.
Interesting.
No, I won't.
Oh, it's an interesting situation all the way around for the city, the people of the Jefferson City using their money to remove a private building and all that, but obviously it is what it is. The good point is it's finally coming down. That is the upside to it. So.
You did do a great job of keeping the citizenry in the loop, because most of the people you ask think it's the biggest debacle they've ever seen, and that the city is totally indecisive and can't make a decision, and people are not happy about it, and people see it as a public safety issue, that corner up there. I'm surprised something bad hasn't happened up there in Dactyl. So, I'm sure there's lots of things that we don't all know, but that was never revealed to the public.
I would agree. So, okay. With that being said, is there anything else that anyone has this evening? I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming tonight.